Good afternoon, social scientists. I thought you could see me for a change. Oh, I don't know if I like it down there. Maybe up here. Oh, there we go. Then I'm actually looking at you. Oh, that's not that flat one though. Okay, that's better. Welcome. It's kind of like I'm teaching you now. How great. I bet you've missed it. I really missed it. So I'm doing this for me more than I am for you. So we are chugging through our year 13 content. Looking at research methods, and you've had a look at choosing a statistical test. You've had a look at the different inferential tests that we use, practice using them, the sign test, Mann-Whitney, Wilcoxon, and the different rules they have, and using the table. So we're going to keep moving forward now. We've got a couple of last little bits of research methods to do. Then you've got some summer homework on issues and debates before we get back into our year 13 topics. So today then what we're going to look at is quite a small section, which is looking at peer review and psychology and the economy. So what is peer review? Why is it useful? There's a really good article that I'll mention in a minute about that. And how can we use psychology to boost the economy, to put more money back into it? Why is it useful? And if we think about in this situation right now with Corona, the economy is very weak at the moment. It's dipped by 20%. So how can psychology contribute to boosting the economy? So just to begin then, how might they be linked? So you can have a think about this yourself. I've kind of given it away then. How is psychology and the economy linked? Well, most likely, and the best obvious answer is through mental health. So people with depression, people with anxiety, people with phobias who maybe are out of work for a long period of time, may be more likely to go back to work if they have some kind of treatment. So through mental health, the cost of mental health treatment to the UK is about 22 billion annually. I think that's probably increased more so now. So it's useful, those treatments like CBT, because then they can get back to work. They can pay their taxes and they can boost the economy and put money back into the system. The current focus of research is dementia at the moment. So we've got, as population are increasing, it's going to be something ridiculous like 1 in 3 of us are going to have dementia by 2025. Don't quote me on that. I think I could be wrong. But it's going to be one of the biggest killers in quite a few of our lifetimes. So what can be done? What treatments can be put in place to help people stay in work so that they haven't got to leave work? What can be done? So treatments are the main thing as to how they're linked. So when it comes to research, if we go back to ethical implications, we've got to weigh up the benefits and the costs. Okay, so whenever there's a bit of research taking place, they'll do a cost benefit analysis. So when we look at therapies, drugs are really cheap, like I said with depression and phobias. Drugs are the first port of action because they are cheaper to the NHS compared to talking therapy or CBT or whatever. So if psychological therapy is better and more effective but more expensive, then we need to look at a variety of different research where we can implement it to people without it costing an arm and a leg, basically. Okay, so it's quite an interesting section. It's a very small section of... is this in the year 1 book or the year 2 book? I think this is in the year 1 book, actually, but a really small section at the end, if you want to make some extra notes. Oh, let's move this over here. So peer review in the economy and psychology in the economy. So yes, this is the year 12 stuff. So we're right at the bottom here. So we need to know what peer review is. We need to look at the implications of what we've explored. And then are there any limitations to peer review and how that impacts on the economy? So just to start then, I prefer it there because I'm looking at you. There's a worksheet attached. So examples of implications for the economy for each section that we've looked at. Memory, social influence, psychopathology. How can those areas be useful for the economy, basically? So the question on the sheet will help you have a think about it. Pause this and then come back and I'll discuss it to you. And then here, let's have a look. So eyewitness testimony, how can that have implications for the economy? If we improve eyewitness testimony, they're going to be more accurate in who they've decided is implicated in the crime, which means that we're saving money on police resources. We're putting the right people away, which means that taxpayers aren't paying excessive amounts for the wrong person, basically. Development of the cognitive interview. So it's been changed, like the enhanced cognitive interview. It's more effective than the standard policing interview that they give, reinstate the context, change perspective. If they embed that in all police forces, then it's going to save time, it's going to save money, and it's going to get results. Social influence then, minority influence. So how can research on small groups of people and how they influence the majority be useful for the economy? Well, minorities influence change. They benefit the society, and they'll also benefit the economy. So by understanding the ways that minorities work and why they can implicate change, then it will make us save more money. So you think about recycling, for example, that was a very small group of people that managed to make such noise that the majority of people now recycle, which means that environmentalists are happy, recycling saved money with the recycling goods, which means we haven't got to spend loads of money on new materials because we're already using what we have, so it's more sustainable, so it's cheaper. For psychopathology then, the standard one, so our treatments, how are they more effective? So it means that we've got a better saving on the NHS, not having to pay out treatments that aren't effective. If we know they work, then we can embed them everywhere. So the person being treated is being treated quicker, can get back to work, and we're saving money on treatments that might not have necessarily had any impact. Like we said, pay taxes, yeah. Yeah, that's fine. Attachment's a really interesting one. So Bobby's view then that children need their mothers. They've got to have that primary caregiver there to stay at home. What effect is that going to have on the economy? Well, if mums are staying at home, only one person's working in the family potentially, so they're not contributing to paying taxes. Later research has shown that actually they're generally fine as long as they've got a good substitute carer. So they go to a really good nursery or good daycare, or they spend time with grandparents or father. There's not really doing much psychological damage. That means that, like most households now, 2 people are going to work, 2 people are paying taxes. Then how could research into things like deprivation and institutionalization have implications for the economy? So we now know that children with a secure childhood, strong role models and compassion, go on to be more productive members of society, which means they're more likely to hold down jobs, they're more likely to contribute. Biopsychology we haven't really looked at yet. That's our first module in year 13. But we look at sort of AI and smart machines. How are they going to affect the economy? Well, it's saving money for businesses. They haven't got to employ people. They've got electronic robots that can do it. So that's saving them money, recognizing faces. Passport control, you can go through the machine, put your passport face down. You haven't got to have someone there checking your face to your passport, saving money. So that's really the only thing you need to know for psychology in the economy. You could have a question asking you which area of psychology that you've looked at has the biggest benefit to the economy. They might ask you to look at 2 or 3 areas that we've studied, which are all pretty much there. The next part is peer review. Now, this is an acronym to help you remember the main principles of peer review. So it's peer views are so overrated. Publish, valid, appropriate method, significant for the area, and original. So what a peer review does is if you do some research in an area like memory, then you find a prominent researcher in that area. They will look at the paper that you have put out and decide whether or not it's useful, it's valid, it's appropriate, and it should be published or not. I want you to think about why that might be a problem if you've got somebody really high up in that field looking at your work. That's one of the things we need to explore here. So peer review is a process. And when you go to university, whatever course you do, if you go to university, most of the essays you'll be on Google Scholar, looking at a lot of different studies and research into your area. So for psychology, we've got the Journal of Behavioral Neuroscience, the Journal of Social Psychology, the Journal of Clinical Psychology. So there's lots out there, and they are basically bits of research that have been peer-reviewed and published for people to use. So it's part of the scientific process. Once you've carried out your research, you write it up as a formal paper with an aim, a method, findings, and a discussion. They take ages. That's your dissertation, basically. A good 10,000 words. So in a particular format, sets out what you were looking at. If you want that published, then you have to have it peer-reviewed by other people. So usually they are high up in that field. So an expert will come along, they'll have a look at the journal, they'll read, look for any mistakes. They will then say, right, this can be published, it's been reviewed, it will go into the Behavioral Neuroscience Journal, or they can reject it and say, actually, it's not good, it's not useful, it doesn't tell us anything, there's lots of mistakes, so it doesn't get put into the paper. But usually, in most papers, there are small changes that need to be adjusted and made. Why are they peer reviewed? So it has to be, it's a guideline. Any research that's published should be of really high quality because people are going to be using it. So whether that psychologists are using it to develop what they are focusing on, whether it's students using it in their essays, whether it's clinical and it's going to be used in certain settings. So it has to be of high quality. It helps allocate research funding. So the government spends about £5.8 billion on research. So it's got to be worthwhile. That can be interesting as well, because if the government are going to spend money on it, it's something that they have to back. So there's a little bit of political bias as to what they're going to put money into. In order to be published, it has to be peer reviewed. It contributes to research ratings of university departments if they've had lots of papers in journals. And it's meant to spot any fraudulent research. So if people have been like, well, I've found that autism is linked to the MMR jab. That's fraudulent research. That's not true. But people have tried to advocate that it is. Through peer review, we realise that actually it's not, and it shouldn't be out there because it's causing a lot of misunderstanding. So it has to be trusted by the public. Why does it matter if research isn't accurate? Well, have we heard of the 11 plus? Hopefully, sociologists, you definitely will. The 11 plus is an exam to get you into certain schools back in the day. It's based on faulty research. So the person who carried it out, Cyril Burt, this is something you can use for this section, said that he produced evidence that the IQ is inherited, that people are naturally intelligent based on their genes. Part of that is true. Intelligence is partly genetic and can be manipulated by the environment somewhat, but he said specifically the IQ score you get is inherited. If IQ is inherited, though, and nothing will change, then it would make sense for schools to teach different things according to their pupils. That's what he argued. Excuse me. So this gave rise to this massive separation between grammar schools and secondary moderns and state schools. So if you were more academic, you would go to the grammar school. If you weren't, you didn't have a certain IQ score, you would just go to either a vocational school where you focus on your working with your hands and trades, or just a bog standard secondary school. But his research was fraudulent, so he made quite a lot of it up. He sort of just pulled things from the air and was like, yeah, this will do. So dodgy research has massive implications because all of these people then went either to a grammar school or to a state school or to a vocational school based on research that wasn't really real, didn't really make any sense. So problem peer review on page 100 of your book. It's not always possible to find an expert in a certain field. So if you're doing research on something really, really niche, how are you going to find out who the expert is? You might be the expert. So how does that work? Journals tend to publish studies that have positive results. So there's something called the file drawer effect, where if they don't think, or if it doesn't meet what the expert wants, they'll put it to one side and they'll hide it and pretend it never existed. Or if actually the expert is like, oh, why didn't I think of that? They won't publish it, and maybe they'll carry out the research themselves to make themselves look better. So they only look for results that have a significant result. So things that maybe go against the grain or are a bit, what's the word? So it doesn't fit with the patterns they found before is sometimes ignored because they prefer it to keep to what they know. Once it's been published, it's quite hard to retract it and remove it from that journal because people might have already used it. So it's in the public domain, the damage is pretty much done. Doesn't always spot the mistakes, yeah. So we've got a couple of examples. So I've mentioned this one earlier. So Andrew Wakefield was the guy who said autism is due to MMR. And there are still people out there who believe that to be true, who think, actually, I'm not going to vaccinate my child because I don't want them to be autistic. But there is no link. It was completely wrong. His methods were faulty. The conclusions weren't scientific. There was a conflict of interest. So he was quite selective on the data that he chose, unethical dealings with children. So there wasn't any real consent or... and he was being paid to research it. Struck off the medical council, who's not a doctor anymore. The rumour still exists, so people still don't vaccinate because they're worried about getting autism, which is just crazy. Whereas I think in this day and age, with COVID-19, everybody's going to be vaccinated, hopefully. So that's a nice example that you can use there. Quick quiz for you to do on your own at home. Only the conclusions drawn in a study will be validated in a peer review. False. Modern attachment research suggests that the mother should stay at home and look after the kids. Hell no. By the time the work comes to be peer reviewed, it's too late to make any amendments. No, from the peer review, the amendments are made. Effective treatment for mental disorders means that often sufferers can continue to work, and that is true. So it gets them back out there, gets them paying taxes. And that's that. So that very small section on page 100 of your textbook is the last two little bits of, I think it's the last two little bits of research methods for year 12. So we've got to look at case studies, content and thematic analysis. We need to look at features of science. We've got 2 or 3 bits to have a look at, and then we're completely done with research methods. So I hope this has been useful, and hopefully, it's a bit teaching. This is lovely. How nice. And I will speak to you soon.